I'm not sitting down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that contribution by the member who's just taken her seat shows why this country is still in recession. While she pats herself on the back for a job well done, New Zealanders are suffering, our economy is flailing, and the fact that the government is sitting here in a self-congratulatory manner saying job well done, as George W. Bush said, mission accomplished, mission accomplished. I think the member might want to perhaps extend herself beyond her research unit notes and go and talk to some real New Zealanders and see how they're doing given that contribution. Mr. Chair, I want to talk about the issue of student levies. It's something that the Minister briefly touched on in his contribution. Now, he said we're on the side of the students, and the member who took a chair said we're on the side of the students, we're great for students, NZUSA thinks we're fantastic. Well, let's have a look at why we need to put a cap on levies. That's what she said, that's what she said. Anyway, it's a quote. Well, let's have a look at why we're putting a cap on levies. We're putting a cap on levies because universities have been shifting money from that fund to pay for core things like staffing because of the funding squeeze under this national government. Now, I remember in the first, the Minister can do vomit kind of little gestures with his finger. He's so mature, so mature. No, that's not what you were doing, Minister. I know you're trying to say you were scratching your lip, but I saw it. The fact is, Minister, that in the first budget, one of the first things they cut was the funding that universities got in order to be able to match international salaries for people that we bring to New Zealand to add value to our tertiary education system. It was a common practice. That was one of the first things that went. And what that meant was that if universities around New Zealand wanted to maintain their very good standing in the world and wanted to attract these high achievers in the academic world, researchers, then they needed to find the funding from elsewhere. Now, that and a number of other things ended up being squeezed from university budgets. So what we found was these student levies being used as a de facto way of covering staffing costs, covering the core things that our universities carry out. So the cap on levies is not going on because this government loves students. The cap on levies is going on because they're desperately trying to put their fingers in all the holes as the dam is breaking because of a lack of funding in our universities. And the question has to be, so what's going to give? Because if there's not enough money across the board, and we're now saying, well, these are this pot of money, this pot of money, this pot of money, and you can no longer transfer across, the question is, what's got to give? If the Minister restricts these student levies, what is going to give? And we know what's going to give because it's an issue that we've been debating in this House for some time, and that is student services. That is the kind of services that students rely on, not just to make their tertiary education experience better or more valuable, but the food banks that student associations run, the representation that student associations give, the counselling services that student associations provide. These are the things that are going to give. These are the things, the hardship grants that students have to apply for. Some of the tutoring, the extracurricular tutoring that went on in universities, not to mention the health centres and all those other things as well. And this is particularly important because we're talking about increasing transparency in this part of the bill and students having more say. Well, that's what the Minister says, that students will have more say in terms of how this money is spent, what it's spent on, what the level of the levy will be. Well, who is the Minister going to consult with when student associations are gone?
That's right.
These are democratically elected associations representing students. First port of call for anyone who wants to consult with the student body. What's that, sorry? Oh, well, see, this is just the ridiculousness. Colin King said quasi-unions. And I respect this member, what a ridiculous statement. If that's the reason that National doesn't like student associations is because sometimes they're called student unions, that's the kind of thing I expect from Tau Henare and Paul Quinn back there, not from Colin King. That is a really disappointing statement.
Order, point of order. That is a fair call, relevancy.
I couldn't possibly speak to Paul Quinn's relevancy, Mr. Chair. But the reason is that I was interjected on and I was responding. Student associations are part of providing the transparency required in this part of the bill, because the Minister has talked in this part of the bill about students having a greater say. Students having a greater say in how the levies are set and what the levies are spent on.
Mr. Chair.
Colin King.
Mr.